Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dr. Joy Purser, and I am the Global Field CISO at COHO. Our guest for today's webinar is Eric O'Neill. Eric is a cybersecurity expert and author of the book Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. He is a former FBI counterintelligence operative. Since then, Eric has spent decades as a national security advisor, an attorney, a corporate investigator, and a national cybersecurity strategist. Eric, we're so glad to have you with us.
Joy, it is a pleasure to be here, and great thanks to COHO for putting this together and allowing us to get this important information out to the world.
Fantastic. As you all know, COHO is the #1 maker of data backup systems, and our platform protects, secures, and provides insights into the data of the world's largest and most complex organizations. And because of the work we do in helping to mature the resilience of organizations, COHO also observes a lot of incidents. So we've learned a lot of lessons and have identified experts like Eric who can lend his expertise to help develop a more fulsome discussion around the topic of resilience. So Eric, you've spent your career thinking about the adversary. And when you look at today's cyber landscape, what do you think most organizations still misunderstand about how cyber attacks actually unfold?
Yeah, that is just as a perfect place to start. And why? Because what we're here to do, really, ultimately, is keep organizations from becoming those organizations that learn this the hard way. So many organizations go through the fire, survive an attack, and it's a difficult thing sometimes to survive a very large-scale attack when it becomes a catastrophe, and then look at their cybersecurity and become stronger after the attack. That's why you can look at so many organizations who have survived breaches, and they tend to have pretty good cybersecurity. We don't want anyone here to have to deal with that. So the most difficult thing you could do is believe that you can somehow Teflon yourself from attacks. In reality, the adversary has the advantage, a lot of advantages actually. They have the advantage of time. You are looking for an attack, they can be patient. They can use the Espionage Act of reconnaissance to learn everything about you, to find the perfect time and place and target for the attack. They're very sophisticated. In my book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, I describe the upgrade of cybercrime from the kid in the basement to large cybercrime gangs, what I call syndicates in the book, who not only are learning from intelligence officers, they're hiring them. And using the sophistication, time, and pretty sophisticated technology, they will get in. So the best cybersecurity has to be counterintelligence, what I call spy hunting. That's my background. I hunted spies all over the US. I was also hunted terrorists. And the best way to defeat the adversary is to look for them. You have to continually hunt the threat. And what I like to say is you hunt that threat before it hunts you. Because you have to assume today that these attackers are going to breach your perimeter. And resilience, what we're really talking about here, is the ability to recover from that attack without great amounts of pain. So let's look at two quick examples. One, it just happened this month. On March 11th, a huge medical company was hit by an attack by a group called Handala that is connected to Iran. So this certainly looks, and a lot of intelligence people have weighed in on this, and I've even weighed in on the news, this certainly looks like an Iran-backed cyber attack group who launched an attack on a large medical company that provides all sorts of medical devices and even supports our military when they're injured as part of a critical infrastructure attack here in the US. They were attacked on March 11th. They didn't get back up to speed until April 1. And what the attackers did was essentially use their Microsoft endpoint cybersecurity against them to spread the attack and just wipe their data. There was no ransomware. They weren't trying to make money. It was simply a malicious attack to take their data and destroy it, to cripple this part of our medical critical infrastructure. March 11th to April 1, all that time is a long time to be down when you're a global corporation. So that suggests that, hey, if they were more resilient, maybe they could have seen the attack faster and got out from under it from the start. Let's go down a year or so ago to the attack on MGM, right? And this is in Vegas. I mean, I don't know how many of you love Vegas. I speak there all the time. I didn't realize until this attack happened that the MGM Grand, they own half the hotels in Vegas. And a cybercrime group, this is just a bunch of cyber criminals trying to make a buck called ALF5. They all have clever little names. Used some of their friends to social engineer MGM. And it was a 10-minute phone call. And in just 10 minutes, they were able to reset the username, the password, and the two-factor authentication for one of their systems engineers. There's the IT people who are able to do all sorts of things in the network, like create accounts, escalate privileges, access different areas, create whole new accounts with usernames and passwords. And they created mayhem in MGM to the point where people couldn't check into hotels. They couldn't make reservations for meals or for shows. And some key cards opened all the hotel doors. Most key cards didn't work at all. And the hotels were even putting bottles of water in the elevators just in case the elevators shut down between like the 45th and 46th floor. And they didn't know how long it was going to take to get them up. It was massive chaos, a huge ransomware attack. And that cost them, because they were down for weeks, well over $100 million. So, Joy, when we talk about resilience, we're talking about identifying that attack as soon as it lands or as fast as possible and having the tools to get out from under it and back to business without a massive amount of pain and the emptying of your pocketbook.
All right. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said. And as someone who has studied spy tradecraft, counterintelligence for years, and I myself have worked at the Pentagon and at CISA, and knowing your adversary is really important to being able to develop countermeasures. I read a report by Picus Security. Their red report came out a couple of weeks ago. They analyzed over 1 million malware samples from open source, from various private sector companies and other places. And they noticed a huge pivot in the tradecraft to trying to be undetected for as long as possible. So we see the gap between APT, or advanced persistent threats, nation states, and the gangs and script kiddies and the more loosely organized non-military groups. I see that chasm shrinking, and I'm curious to know what you think about that and why that might be happening.
Yeah, great question. And it really is one of the top premises of my book, the collapse of this distinction between spies and cyber criminals. In fact, what I've been saying is that the only difference today between an elite intelligence operation from one of the adversary countries and a group of cyber criminals is the outcome. All of the tactics are the same. So like you said, they are performing reconnaissance. They're learning everything they can about you. They're spending plenty of time doing it. And they're leveraging AI right now to help them, just the way that we do to help us. I mean, cybersecurity leverages AI, certainly, in order to do everything it does, but we do in our daily lives. They have AI agents that are that have no guardrails. They're as depraved as you want, and they will do anything you ask it to do. And they spend time scanning vulnerabilities on networks, coming up with brilliant ideas for social engineering attacks, discovering who the best individuals to target in a company or an organization or agency are based on doing reviews of social media. They're helping these spies and cyber criminals be incredibly good at finding that perfect target that is going to land them in the system. And when they get there, both spies and criminals are spending as much time as they can. So we're seeing a big increase in what we call dwell time, the time from when they land to when they execute whatever they're going to do, because they want to spread. They want to be careful. They want to look for counterintelligence. So cybersecurity is hunting them, right? So they're looking for counterintelligence. They're erasing their tracks. They want to make it incredibly hard for you to discover the point that they landed. And this is really important. I'll get to that in a minute. So put a pin in it. They don't want you to know when they got in. That's super important to them. And then they do what they're going to do. If it's spies, they steal your data. They learn about you. They discover something that's going to help them. And then they slip out the door, erase everything behind them, and they just hope you never discover they were there. They want to ghost you, right?
Yes.
Criminals are different.
Yeah.
Like those spies got paid the entire time they were attacking you. They get a salary. They're highly trained. They're going to steal that information. They're going to get some award from somebody. Criminals only get paid if they succeed, right? They only get paid if you pay them. So what they want to do is create some situation where they are exerting maximum pressure on you. So they are going to find that data that you have that is going to hurt you the most. Is it your customer data? Is it your patient data? Is it your IP that you haven't disclosed yet to the world? How you do what you do, how you make the sausage? Whatever that is, they're going to find it, and they're going to do a number of things. They're going to destroy it. They're going to lock it and encrypt it, which is a ransomware attack, or they're going to steal it, or they're going to do all three. If they steal it, they're going to extort you for it, because you might say, I got a good backup. And they're going to say, if you don't buy this, we're going to publish it for everyone you see. Now, why don't they want you to know when they landed and how long they were there? Because if you don't know when they landed, you can't say where you need to restore from.
Exactly.
You don't know how far back, because we do good backups, and backup is so critical to cybersecurity, because you have to have a point where you say, this is where they landed. So all we have to do is back up a week from there and restore from there. And it's going to suck because we lost that week of data, but we're going to be okay. We can recover that. And it's a lot less expensive than paying this ransom or doing all the other work we need to do. So they do a lot of tactics and tooling to make sure you don't know when they were there, to make that pressure grow. And the more pressure they can put on you, the more likely it is that you will pay.
Yes, and we're seeing an uptick on attacks on critical infrastructure like healthcare that is almost like a parallel war to the war that's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, that is exactly right. In fact, I have been, it's a bit of a conundrum. I have been concerned for some time that we would see a large-scale critical infrastructure attack by Iran. Now, they hit the medical company, and we know that they are targeting other commercial companies like that are a big part of our supply chain, which causes chaos and pain in general for people here in the United States. But you can be certain that they are looking to attack us in a bigger way against our critical infrastructure. And in the last 10 years, and I cite a lot of these examples in the book, Iran has come after our water, our power, our healthcare, our manufacturing sectors, and other sectors, but primarily water and power, two of the most important areas of critical infrastructure that we rely on to be safe, happy, and secure. They actually made a few attacks in the last number of years against water systems, which tend to be a little easier to attack than power for different reasons. But if they've been preparing for 20 years, now would kind of be the time for them to do it, right?
True.
True. You would think that if they've been doing all this preparing, these probe attacks, which we catch them in there, they're just trying to see how long they can be there, how long they can persist, how deep they can get, so that if, there's maybe a war with Iran, then they launch the attack. And the fact that they haven't launched the attack may suggest that the attacks on Iran itself has the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is responsible for a lot of these attacks, and the proxy groups that launch cyber attacks against us and others. They might be just so on their heels right now that they haven't been able to get their act together, but they are very sophisticated. And, I wake up every morning and wonder if I'm going to hit the light switch and it's going to go on or not.
Yeah, yeah. One other thing I noticed about the tradecraft of cyber attacks is that another technique that is growing is the development of malware that not only hides, within a normal process or has a file name that just sounds normal, but that also dwells until there is a tripwire indicating that the victim knows about it. And then it detonates. I found that to be very interesting. That was a top 10 technique in this report.
Yeah, and certainly clever, and shows that cyber crime is really modeling espionage. I mean, that's just another proof of it. And there are so many out there. In my book, I show a number of large-scale cyber attacks against companies by intelligence, by Russia and China, that were then completely modeled and used against other companies by cyber criminals. And they're doing the same thing. So a lot of what they're doing is creating these attacks that are clever, hidden, and just like spies. They don't want to be seen. They want to burrow as deep and as far as they can. And then, yes, if they think that cybersecurity is onto them, they detonate, they explode.
Yeah.
AI is doing a lot of the work to help build these new novel attacks, these new novel malicious software. I worked with a company, I advised a company that was using AI to create new zero-day attacks in an enclosed environment, right? So they were actually using servers that were connected to nothing, and in case to keep any of this from getting out, they could detonate it and kill it all with a button. But what they were doing is using AI to build malware that they could then use to train the good cybersecurity AI for the attacks of the future. Because we know that cyber criminals are doing the same thing. They have their own laboratories where AI is continually building new and more innovative attacks.
Absolutely. So the point of this for our guests on the webinar is not to scare anyone. It's just to
Right.
build your awareness of what's happening with the threat landscape. Because I think if you can be aware of the threat, you can have greater awareness of the risk that you need to mitigate. And so all of this, of course, underscores the importance of resilience. And resilience is a much bigger concept than just good backups, right? It's not only technology, but it's also people and process. And I always say that the backups alone won't save you. You have to have well-trained teams. You have to have processes. And just as Kevin Mandia mentioned in his keynote at the RSA conference last week, you must red team, you must pen test, you must tabletop exercise, you must spot check continuously. And the harder you work at that exercise, the better off will be your resilience. So Cohesity has looked around and basically said, in terms of organizational resilience, the people, process, and technology, what are the steps that organizations, public or private sector, can take to increase the maturity of their resilience posture? And so we created a framework that helps organizations know how to get started and build the maturity of the resilience. And it starts with, 1, protect all the data. 2, ensure the data is always recoverable. 3, know how to investigate threats successfully. 4, practice, practice, practice. And 5, evolve and optimize. So in terms of the first step of that maturity levels, in protect all data, we know that attackers look for blind spots and weak assumptions. In counterintelligence work, attackers always target what's least protected or what's least monitored or what's not looked at. So Eric, in your experience, where do organizations tend to make dangerous assumptions about what data matters or is safe enough?
Yeah, so what I said earlier was that, attackers, and let's particularly focus on cyber criminals, because let's be honest, for most people in organizations, what you're worried about is a cyber criminal, not Russia or China. They only win if they get paid, right? They have to put that maximum pressure on you in order to turn the screws to the point where you just want to pay them, get it over with, and relieve the pressure, whether that's getting your data back or getting your decryption key, or even understanding when they landed so you can figure out when to restore from backup. And to do this, they are always going to hunt the data that's most critical to you, right? So one thing I say in my book is that data has become the currency of our lives. And since the book came out, and it's still very new, I've kind of moved to trust is now the most important thing, and it's become an uncommon commodity. But data is so critical. So here are some mistakes. Here's 2 big mistakes that organizations often make. They don't understand their data architecture. So when I say that, it's not, you have data. It's a lot of stuff, right? It's your IP, it's your HR, it's your finance, it's your executive. It's all the data that you have stored on your systems. And you have to understand where it resides, who has access to it, and what is the most critical data that requires the strongest security. And you need to build that security around the most critical data. The other thing, number two, is organizations fail to segment their data. So what do I mean by that, right? So in the old days, when I was operating undercover in the FBI and in the intelligence world, we still use this word. We call it compartmentalization. And if you want the really cool term, it's like the James Bond, for your eyes only. That means you got a lot of data, and an immense amount of data, and growing and growing and growing, like every day, every second, right? You need to understand where it is, what it is, and who has access to it. Everybody shouldn't have access to everything. I do vulnerability assessments of companies. And with small businesses, often we come in and we find that one of the big fail points is that numerous people all have access to the same data, even if they have no need to know it. HR and finance and exec all have access to all the same information, right? So if you are able to compromise someone in HR, now you've just lost finance, exec, and HR. IT has access to everything. You haven't even compartmentalized your IT team, and so on and so forth. The worst thing you can do is have one set of data that everybody can see and access, because you've created a single point of failure. If you build your data into compartments that only certain people have access to, that gives you two really cool skills. One, you know that if a person is compromised, and today it's almost always a person that's compromised. It's the number one way that attacks happen, particularly with cyber criminals. They're not coming after your computer systems. That does happen here and there, but mostly they come after your people because they know it's the easiest way in. And we'll probably get into some stories there too. But if they do compromise a person and they only have access to a small percentage of data, one, that's the only thing that's been compromised. And two, you know exactly who was compromised by the data that was lost or accessed. And you can see where the person was able to attack and how long they were there. I mean, that is gold if you're in the middle of a cyber attack and you're trying to find your way out of it.
It is gold. And our backups are immutable by default because of the platform, the SpanFS data platform that Cohesity uses. And that is a very important support for forensic analysis. So we think that security teams really like our platform as well as the IT or backup teams. But as we go to step 2 in this maturity, resilience maturity framework, ensuring that data is always recoverable is the next level up. So Eric, you've seen attacks where the breach itself really wasn't the worst thing. It was the inability to recover was really the fatal blow. So in your observation, what separates those organizations that are able to survive besides backups? Okay, so I think we've already established that, but give us some more nuance about who survives versus who really struggles.
Certainly. Well, let's sort of go backwards to where this all is coming from. The cost of dark web cybercrime right now is over $12 trillion. So let that sink in for a minute. That's $12 trillion and growing exponentially. It could surpass 20 in the next couple of years at its current rate of growth. So that means that cybercrime right now, just cybercrime, and the dark web is where you can, I mean, I have a friend who, it take you over the shoulder in a chapter in my book into the dark web. We go deep down into some of the most depraved marketplaces on earth, human trafficking, weapons, drugs, you name it, you can buy it on the dark web. And I don't suggest that anyone try to go down in there because there are so many traps for the unwary. It's not a place for tourists. But take that all out, and just the cost of cybercrime is right now 12 trillion. That would be the third largest economy on earth. I mean, that's insane. That is massive, which means there are a lot of cyber criminals out there, an immense amount of cybercrime. So let's just play odds and statistics. It's not whether you're going to be attacked, but when. So you need to be ready for it. You need to prepare for it. So building resilience in your data becomes incredibly critical, because when the attacker lands, cybersecurity has to do a number of things very rapidly. It has to anticipate the attack. So you need to know that an attack is coming. That means you're ready for it, right? You're assuming that an attack is going to land, so you're constantly hunting that threat. You need to identify the threat quickly. You can anticipate until you're blue out of the face, But if you don't, or if you're not able to hunt the threat and say, oh, the attack landed, and here's where and here's when, then that doesn't help you. And then you got to kick the criminal or spy out of your systems, because they're going to create damage. But the idea now in cybersecurity isn't to build the great castle defense and no one's going to get in. It's going to be assume they're going to get in, they're going to do a damage, but it's going to be a little bit of damage that we can deal with and recover from. You don't want it to become chaos. And like I said earlier, that pressure that makes you feel like you need to pay. And then finally, determine where the attacker landed, what they accessed, stole, or compromised. And that point that you kicked them out. Now you've got a nice little focused pocket of intelligence that tells you this is really all that they did. And so we've limited the amount that our lawyers have to get involved with in disclosing. So companies that don't prepare ahead of this attack, well, what they end up doing is spending an incredible amount of money on those forensics, the recovery, the remediation, all to determine the point of the attack so they know where to restore from their backup. So a backup isn't enough. You need to do all that work to make sure that you're prepared ahead of the attack. And the sad thing is I focus mostly on small to medium-sized businesses, sort of mid-level on their way to enterprise, and we try to help them get there. A lot of small businesses never survive this. If you haven't prepared ahead of it, that cost can be extraordinary. And what I say all the time is, don't wait till the pressure situation to examine your cybersecurity. Don't wait till you're in the middle of a fire to decide, hey, now we're going to figure out our data and what data is most important and how to protect against those threats, because it becomes incredibly expensive.
You're right. You're right. You raised some points about threat hunting, and that brings us to our level 3 of our maturity model for resilience. And that is be able to successfully investigate threats. And that's become much less easy than it used to be. What warning signs are most often missed? And why is it that attackers get so much dwell time inside the org? Because I see from one of the comments and the questions about dwell time being 6 months. And I would say in the telecom industry, it's probably much, much, much longer. So what are things that thwart threat hunting?
If you're looking at telecom, hasn't China been in our major cell carriers, except for one, for almost a year now, and we haven't been able to kick them out? They were able to use a backdoor that was given to law enforcement to serve warrants and to get text and voice information. And if you remember, last year, the FBI was putting out PSAs telling people, if you're going to make conversations that are confidential or critical, you might want to use encrypted applications and be careful what you say on the phone, because China might be listening. That boggles your mind. So yeah, telecom, sure, that dwell time is much longer than 6 months. And a 6-month dwell time will end you. That means that they've had an enormous amount of time to really spread as far as they possibly can. So when they bring you down, it's going to hurt. And it all goes to preparation. And I want to go back to just a great point you made, Joy, because it's not just your technology stack and your architecture, but it's your people. And I just want to focus on that for a second, because the most damaging attacks, it starts with people who make the mistake that opens the door wide to the attacker. And attackers are getting very clever. They know that cybersecurity is getting better and we are pacing them. So just throwing malware at you doesn't have the same effect. So what they're doing is looking for that pressure, the people that will let them right in. And this happens in a number of ways. There are complete fileless and malware-less attacks. It doesn't even use it. Like, for example, companies here, I'll just tell a quick story. Looking at a company, and they're one of the people who worked in finance who routinely was paying invoice after invoice after invoice, got this perfect-looking invoice emailed to her. She opened it up, and it was for an event that the company had booked, and it was for catering. And the catering company is saying that, you owe us this money. And she looks at it and she recognizes it, but she thinks they already paid it. And she sees this handy number at the bottom to call. And so she calls, and it's this really polite person. And he's very knowledgeable. He understands when the event was, where the event was, who the director was who threw the event. And, the price looks about right. And they start chatting. He's got, by the way, a really nice voice. He's very intelligent. He knows the area. He certainly lives there. He's not like from some foreign country. And, they're talking about restaurants they like to go to. He keeps them on the phone. It's very personal to the point, we talked to her where she thought she was going to get a date out of it. Like they were talking so long until finally he says, hey, look, we have this new program we're piloting for payment. And it's an app. So if you just download the app, then it makes it really seamless to pay us. And so she does. She downloads it. She installs it on her system. She looks at it and then says, before she sends the money that way, you know what? I don't feel comfortable. We're not really supposed to do this. I'm just going to delete this and send you the check. And he goes, no harm, no foul. That's fine. This is on a Friday. By Monday, the company is completely locked by ransomware. It was a remote access Trojan that she installed for him, right? He didn't do anything other than talk her into it. And now that's how they got in. And cybersecurity wasn't built to see that Trojan should have been blocked on her system, because this was an internal person doing it, not an external person trying to make the change. And she never obviously got the date. So it was, two bad stories. Here's one more quick story, Joy, because this is great. Because we have to talk a little bit about how AI is also changing the game in these attacks that I call imposter or confidence scheme attacks. This takes place in Hong Kong. It's a company that's a multinational company. They're headquartered out of the UK. And they, of course, have a branch in Hong Kong. And the financial manager there in Hong Kong, one of the finance guys, gets an email. I mean, I know it always starts with email, but see, attackers have to get more clever than just the basic email. Now, the email comes from the CFO, and stop me if you've heard this one before. It doesn't say, you need to pay this wire immediately, because if you don't, then we're going to lose this project, and keep it confidential. I'm trusting you. I'm going to, email me back immediately when you've paid the wire. That is still a multi-billion-dollar crime every year. Just those simple business email compromise emails where the bad guys pretend that there's someone in power and email someone, in the lower level. By the way, now they're sending text to your staff. They're reaching out to people through direct messages and every way they possibly can. But this is more clever. The email just says, join me in a Zoom call, like a conference call. And he does. And he sees the CFO in one box, just like we're in two boxes. And he sees two people he recognizes from finance, two people he doesn't. And the CFO just says, I'd like everyone to please introduce themselves. And everybody does. And he learns the two people he doesn't recognize are new partners for a new architectural deal. They need to be funded. And our protagonist, not our hero, is going to do the funding. And then the call is abruptly cut. Over the next 2 weeks, he receives 15 more emails directing him to send wires to 5 separate bank accounts in Hong Kong to the tune of $25 million, which he does, until finally that feeling in his stomach, of unease grows into an ulcer. He calls over to the UK to the CFO's office. He says, do you want me to keep sending these wires? And they've never heard of him or the wires, right? The entire thing was an AI deepfake. This is what we're up against. And when we're talking about resilience, it's not just somebody got in and loaded ransomware. It's your people have to understand how to look out for these things, to be spy hunters for you, to be part of cybersecurity, because we all have a role to play. Every single person in an organization needs to play that role, because everybody's a point of attack.
Absolutely. That brings us to the matter of practicing, exercising, tabletop exercises, spot checks. When you work with organizations, what do you find is their greatest struggle in terms of practicing? And what do you prescribe to them in terms of probably a multi-dimensional strategy of pen test, red teaming, tabletop exercise?
So it's all those. We find that one of the most difficult things for employees is that many organizations are doing the bare minimum liability protection, which isn't training. What do I mean by that? How many people sitting out there in the world listening to the two of us talk have had to sit through this incredibly boring online cybersecurity training that you basically just click through and hope to get through. And maybe you know a lot of the stuff and you get through quick, and it makes you sit there for an extra half hour just because you got through it too quick and you just want to die. I mean, though, that no one learns anything from that. So tabletop exercises are great. Bringing teams together to talk about these things, learning about these things, hearing stories. So I do a lot of work with organizations where I come in and I do these classes where you know, with storytelling, the same way that we're doing this here, Joy, the same way that I write in my book, you see the attacks, right? You're not just told this happens, but you see the attacks, you're able to put yourself in the story, and then you recognize it when that attack is coming after you. Red teaming is important. You need to test your organization. You need to make sure people understand it. But then when you red team and you find that point of failure, everybody has to explain, hey, this happened, and never make it pejorative, right? It shouldn't be a penalty because someone made a mistake. It should be a opportunity to learn, which doesn't mean you get thrown in one of those horrible online trainings. It means that someone sits down with you and has a conversation and explains how the attacker was thinking and how you as a spy hunter could have caught it. And you will be called in the future to save it. So it's many of those things put together, but a lot of it is connecting with employees, connecting with people, and teaching them rather than just throwing information at them.
Yes, that is the people part of the equation, Eric, because we talk about people, process, and technology. And I think it's so important for security leadership, whether it's the CISO or the director of security ops or whoever is leading the resilience policies or plans, to be able to message appropriately to teams to say, we're not trying to shame anyone. We're trying to make ourselves better. And I've talked with organizations. I sat with a large logistics org a few months ago, and they reflected on when they had done their first tabletop, their first real exercise. And they got to the point where the backup team it was too difficult. They just threw up their hands, and it was bad. You know, it was embarrassing to them. And I always feel so much compassion for that scenario because no one likes failure. But one thing I learned working with the military is that you fail your test all the time because that's how you know that you're getting stronger.
Yeah, that failure is an opportunity to learn. I mean, and it's one of the best ways to learn. You go through it. And that's why the companies that do survive cyber attacks become far stronger and more resilient than they were before, because they have to do all the work that they should have done in the beginning. And now they have this overriding reason to do it. They won't exist if they don't do it. So you see a lot of that. And look, you know, you don't always win, but you can learn from a nice, safe environment where it's a tabletop exercise, and then move forward into ways that are going to protect you in the future, which is a heck of a lot better than learning from being within a cyber attack.
It is. And, you know, you mentioned orgs that were stronger as, you know, as an effect of having been through an incident. And Cohesity did its global annual resilience survey of more than 2,000 professionals. These are decision makers in both IT and security. And for the subset of those respondents who were confident in their resilience posture and in their backups and in their disaster recovery and cyber recovery plans and processes, for those who had been through an incident, 40% were reinfected when they tried to do the recovery. So we understand what happened in a lot of those cases. And I am on a personal mission to educate the world on how to prevent reinfection. And it's not just the tech or just the backups. It's also that process and that people and being prepared.
Right, because the bad guys like to leave things behind. If they can get to your backup, they will alter it. They don't destroy them anymore. Now what they do is they get in there and they alter it so that when you restore from backup, you've restored a backup with another way that they get in. Also, when you've been attacked, you know, they will also sell your information to other cyber criminals. Like, we got these guys, they're easy, and there will be repeat attacks. So just because you managed to restore from backup doesn't mean you've solved your problem. They're going to come right back after you. You still have to address the underlying issue, is that you had a flaw in your security that allowed it to happen in the first place. So even if you can figure it out and restore from your backup and get back up to speed, you're going to be a repeat customer within a week if you don't take the steps to make sure that you close that door that the bad guys got through.
That's right. And extract the bad guys. So our cyber event response team, or CERT, basically says you cannot recover without forensics. And I'll say it
Right.
again because it was a learning for me and for a lot of backup teams, I suspect, is that you cannot recover without forensics, because if the bad guys are still in your network and you're trying to recover, guess what? You're going to get schwacked over and
Right.
over again. So you must be confident that the threat actor is extracted and that you are recovering into a trusted state, so into your isolated recovery environment, and that you have compartments therein for your forensics team to operate. You may, if you said you worked, Eric, with small or medium-sized businesses, a lot of them for incident response, they contract in a team. You know,
Yes.
there are lots of very well-funded incident response firms globally, and I think it's really important for the backup team to understand what they're doing and have those relationships solid, because it's no good to be making friends in a crisis.
Yeah, and have it tested. I mean, if you're very small, a service that's very important, if you don't have a CISO, is get a fractional CISO. Someone who is already within your company, who's sitting next to people at the executive team here and there. It's like a few hours a week, right? Which is very budget friendly, but understands in an intricate way your design, your systems, your problems, your risk, and is able to build security that fits you, right? What a lot of small businesses, and I get into small business really quick, but what we see a lot of small businesses failing at is they just go to some big company that sells them a Cadillac version of something they don't need, right? And and doesn't fit it to them. And so it's really important. And then they don't know how to use it because they don't have a cybersecurity person. So it can be good to get that outside expertise that comes in, provides that resource, and then when everything goes bad, right, they can be there and help run it. Hey, one other thing that I want to mention from something you said, Joy, was that if you wait to look at your security when you're in the fire, and this goes to forensics, yes, you're going to have to do the forensics. You're going to have to find the attacker. You're going to have to kick them out, and then you're going to have to build security from the outside in while you're in the middle of a cyber attack. And the cost there will be somewhere between 4 and 10x what it would cost if you do it now when things are chill and you don't have that pressure. When you go to a cohesity, you go somewhere and you get them to come in and take a good look, examine your cybersecurity before the attack. Don't wait till the attack, because then it is so much more expensive and it's not worth the pain.
You're right. You're right. Which is how we come to our step 5 for our resilience maturity posture, which is evolve and optimize. So we know that the attackers evolve constantly. So Eric, in your perspective, what does a mature and resilient organization do differently over time to stay ahead of the risk than doing that last minute reaction?
Well, you can read my book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, but yes, you should. But what I did come up with in the book is a methodology, and I love your 5-step. It's kind of like mine, which is PAID. I use PAID because we all want to get paid, right? It's prepare, assess, investigate, and decide, right? So we prepare ahead of the attack. You don't wait for the pressure situation to examine your security. You're going to do it now after we get off the webinar, where you have the bandwidth and the time and the energy and the budget to do it, right? And there are ways to find that budget. It's possible. Believe me, we've worked with all sorts of companies. So you're preparing, which means that you've invested in cybersecurity. You've done the right things to your architecture. You've invested in your people. They're your early warning systems. You're doing all the things you need to, including a really good backup that the attackers can't compromise. That's something you have to look at. You don't want something that's cheap and tied to your network, where the first thing the attackers are going to do while they're quietly slipping is find the backup and compromise it, so that if you do find them, you'll restore from something that is just going to get you right back in trouble. So you've prepared. But there's no easy button to cybersecurity. It's not set and forget. There's nothing you can install and magically you're good. You have to constantly assess, right? So prepare, assess. Assessing means you're got your radar up. You're looking for the attack. personally in our personal lives, you're looking for those things that are too good to be true. Those things that might be scams. There's windfalls that come out of nowhere. Those requests or those demands or those gifts that have some sort of pressure and urgency behind them. You're looking for things that feel wrong. You're developing, as a professional, what I call the cop instinct, that tickle in your stomach that hit our guy in Hong Kong as soon as he was on that Zoom call, and he thought to himself, this doesn't sound right. I've never met the CFO. Why would he be asking me this directly? And instead of calling, right, he goes forward. He moves forward. So you're assessing. And when your assessment says, we might have a problem, we just might have a problem, you go right into investigate mode. You put on your spy hunter hat and you go find the attacker, right? You do what you need to do. If you're the guy in Hong Kong, you call to the CFO immediately, and you might all want this policy that if I ever come outside of normal channels and ask you for money, I don't care if I'm the president or the CEO or the chair of the board, call me directly, right? Send me a text. Verify. He had just called the CFO. The CFO said, who the heck are you, right? I've never talked to you. I don't get on Zoom calls with people. And, you know, and he would have known, oh, those were all clever deep fakes made by a cybercrime gang. So these are sort of the things you can do to investigate. Now, investigate, if you've got a small IT team, might mean that you've got someone on speed dial, like Joy said, who can come in and help you, that you have a team that is doing this work for you, that they're looking at the issues that you have. You want to make sure that you're going with a company. And I know that Cohesity has the ability to do the forensics. And the reason is that they already have intricate knowledge of your data, so they can see where the attacker landed by looking at that data and analyzing it. So you've prepared, you're assessing, you're investigating when your assessment says there's a problem. But here's number 4, and number 4 is so crucial. Decide. You have to decide to act. You can't just assume it won't happen to you. It will. You can't say it's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen to you. You have to decide to act and take those steps now. And when you're in the middle of it, you have to act decisively. I taught martial arts for many, many, many years. And one of the number one things that we try to teach in self-defense is that the last thing you want to do is do nothing. You want to always do something. Even if you feel like I don't have a chance, you do something, kick, punch, scream, yell, run, right? You don't want to freeze. Cyber attacks tend to have the same sort of situation. When you're in the middle of attack, as an organization, as an individual, you don't want to freeze. You want to decide to act, and act very quickly, because speed matters when you're in the middle of that fire burning around you in a cyber attack.
Certainly does. What great insights, Eric. And there are a few questions coming in, and we've answered about half of them. One of them has to do with compartmented information like protected health information, PHI, or personally identifiable information. And what advice can you give in terms of how organizations store that and protect that?
Yes, definitely. And you know, my company is working with a large medical group, that, not the one that got attacked in our story, but a medical group that is across our country. And because they have that medical information, you know, that is actually regulated information by HIPAA, and that has to be stored in a very particular way. It has to be encrypted. It has to be segmented. You have to limit access. Anyone who has any access to the information has to have the same levels of cybersecurity and consent and disclosure. So yes, a few things you can do. You want to look at that information, and I'm not sure what it is for you. It could be IP, it could be your customer list, it could be data for everybody who signs up for your application, whatever it is. You build the cybersecurity around that, and the first few things you want to look at are who has access to it, and does this person need to have access to it? If they don't need to have access to it, they shouldn't have access to it.
No
if the
exceptions.
CEO doesn't need to see it, they don't need to have access to it, right? So only those who need to have access to it should be able to see it. You build your cybersecurity around that. You're using encryption standards. You're building your endpoint defense around it. You're making sure that even if it's stolen, it's not going to be readable. Everything that you possibly can do, and there's a lot more that you can do, but yeah, the main thing is you want to focus your cybersecurity on that data, because that is your most crucial data.
And you mentioned only those who have need to know. Those are identities. So they're not just people, they are agents and other identities that engage with, interact, or touch or access that data. And I think that's often overlooked right now.
Oh, certainly AI agents. I did a panel at RSA on the threat of AI agents and how companies are diving into AI before they're ready and giving AI agents access to too many things. Here's like a super fast 1-minute story. Company decides to provide AI agents to their staff, and they do. And everybody is able to build their AI agent and use it to do tasks. It's kind of willy-nilly if you think about it. And so this executive at the company decides he's going to use his AI agent to just do a test. What can AI agents do? What can this newfangled AI thing do? So he asks it to go out into the company records and return every single document, email, page that has his name on it. And the AI agent's really happy, like a good puppy. It goes out there and it finds everything with his name on it because it has access to everything, which was a huge mistake. And you know what he found in there? A document with a list of people who are about to be laid off, including him. Do you know what he did?
Wow.
He went and got a really good attorney. They contacted every single person on that list. And before HR could even do anything with the list, they had a massive wrongful termination lawsuit on their hands. So you have to be incredibly careful. With AI agents, you need to create very specific boundaries, not only who can use them and who can access them and for what, but what they can access and what they can decide. You know, you don't want AI agents paying huge invoices. There's another example. An AI agent for a small company, right, decided on its own that its user deserved to fly in a better class. So started, because it had access to book all their travel, started booking everyone, no matter who they were, on first class flights everywhere, you know, non-refundable flights. And by the time they learned it, you know, they were out of pocket tons of money. And you had like the most junior people like, I'm flying first class. This is amazing. I love my AI agent. But, you know, that's a huge problem.
You know, we're almost out of time. So I'd like for us to get into the parting words and parting insights before we conclude the webinar, Eric. So if there's just one piece of advice in terms of getting started for the operators or even the backup admins or IT staff who are listening today, what would you say?
Yeah, well, here's one mindset shift and kind of one practical step, right? The first, and just to reiterate, is assume you'll be breached. I know that it sounds scary, but really the idea is to implement the training and tools that will spot this breach as quickly as possible and also allow you to recover. And when we're talking about resilience, because this has really been about resilience, that's resilience. Spot the breach quickly and recover without huge amounts of pain. And two, look, if you don't have the capacity to do it inside, here's sort of the practical step. Get an external vulnerability assessment of your cybersecurity. These should be budget friendly. You know, organizations like we do it really cheap because we want you to come back to us for help. And they're really critical to revealing the issues that could lead to a catastrophic breach. And you'll be shocked at what you'll find. You know, when we do it, one thing that we almost always find is somewhere, somehow, someone has turned off multi-factor authentication in your organization because somebody complained to IT and the very nice IT person said, I'll just turn it off so it doesn't bug you.
So inconvenient.
That can be catastrophic. Yeah.
Yes.
And if you don't either do those vulnerability assessments yourself, if you have the capacity, or have someone come in and do it, you're never going to find that until it's too late.
Yep, you're right. That is stellar advice, Eric. And we are just about out of time. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Eric O'Neill. Your insights, you know, based on your experience, the life you've lived, and your engagement even today with companies large and small has made all of us a little bit more secure and hopefully resilient today.
Thank you, Joy. It's been an absolute pleasure. And it's great working with you on this webinar and all the other things we do.
All right. Sounds great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.